Hi there and welcome back to Planet Property. Today is the 1st of July, so it is time for another quarterly reading wrap up. And I was looking through the books that I've read this month, no, the last 3 months, sorry, and I haven't really read a lot. So I think it's going to be a short and sweet one, but I think that's, to be fair, sort of considering the last 3 months included APC final assessments, failing the APC, my life kind of feeling like it fell apart a little bit. Restrictions easing in the UK, so lots more plans and stuff. I'm now going out in the evenings. I'm not just sort of sat on my own in my house reading my books. So yeah, read a lot less. And also disappointingly, not many of them were that good. But I'll just give a quick overview of what I've been reading and what I've been enjoying the last few months. There's only one book next to me, but that's because most of the books I read were either library books or Kindle books. But like I say, we'll shoot on through and let's get started. So the first book I read was actually a reread, and it is Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton, which, I mean, I obviously have a physical copy. I bought it when it first came out 3 years ago. And I lent it to the girl that I was living with last year when we first went into lockdown, because I won't go into all of that, but yeah, I was living in a different house last year. I lent it to her, and then when we moved into this place, I just never got it back. So I bought myself another copy of the book because I just couldn't be without it. But it was a paperback copy. I bought it second hand. I think I got it on eBay or something. And it was a paperback copy, whereas my first one was a hardback, and it was second hand that I got on eBay or something. But it actually turned out it was signed by Dolly Alderton, so my love for her, I was just like, wow, this is amazing. I only got this for £2 or something. You don't really care about that, do you? The book, so I don't have it with me because Tom is actually reading it at the moment because he wants to understand what goes on in my brain, because Dolly Alderton speaks for women of my age. But there's also a lot for him to relate to, just sort of general, growing up in the suburbs and life as a kid in the late 90s, early noughties, and moving to London with your friends after uni and doing all of those wonderful experiences that you have. And it's so wonderfully written. It's funny, it's heartbreaking. There are little snippets of bits here and there. So she what's the correct literary term? My A level in English is clearly gone to absolute nonsense. She sort of does sections in the book where she sort of cuts to something else out of the story a little bit, because it's a memoir, so it's a story of her life. And she does sections where she just cuts out to other things. And one of them that I've read it so many times and it just gets me every single time, I find it so funny, and they're all sort of fictional and sort of more embellished perhaps than is reality, but it's actually not too far from reality, and that's what makes it so funny. So there's an email chain from the bridesmaids organising a hen do weekend, and it is sort of over the top and satirical, but it's actually also really accurate, and it's so funny. Any girl my age who's been on a hen do will know it, and I think it's really funny. There are supplementary things like macaroni cheese recipes, which, we're a bit sort of like, come on now, Dolly. We don't really need to learn how to make macaroni cheese from your book, but whatever. It's 100% a 5-star read. Everyone should read it. I mean, I'm speaking as a woman in her late 20s who had these experiences as well, but I just think it's, yeah. So the second book I read is on my Kindle, and it was, hang on, no it's not. I have it. Way, we have a physical book. The Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and obviously they're Sherlock Holmes books. Which stories are in this one? Silver Blaze, The Yellow Face, The Stockbroker's Clerk, The Glorious Scot, The Musgrave Ritual, The Reigate Squires, The Crooked Man, The Resident Painter, The Greek Interpreter, The Naval Treaty, and The Final Problem. I mean, obviously, Sherlock Holmes as a concept, as a character, Holmes and Watson. I've read one or two Sherlock Holmes stories before, but I bought this book years ago in the really lovely Daunt bookshop on Marylebone High Street, which is obviously just around the corner from Baker Street, and it's just been sitting on my bookshelf for ages. And because they are, I mean, they are and they aren't short, they're sort of 30 or 40 pages, but it's actually, physically, it's quite a small book, and they're very digestible. You could read the story in one go, or, you know, 2 goes if you're sort of time limited or whatever. But it's not the way that I often find Victorian writing can sometimes be a little bit difficult to understand and inaccessible. This isn't that at all. Perhaps because obviously we know the Sherlock stories, they've been made into film and television and other kinds of media, so perhaps that helps a little bit, but really accessible, really great, and so interesting to read the actual original works by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And as a result of this, we recently rewatched the TV series Sherlock on Netflix, which is just, I think it's one of the greatest TV series that's ever been made. I'm going to put it out there. It's just, it's so clever, it's funny, it's so well filmed, and yeah, the interpretation of the stories by Mark Gatiss is just, it's brilliant. And also, they filmed a lot of the scenes in Cardiff and at Cardiff University when I was at uni there, so I remember there was a few times actually I went to my building for lectures or whatever, and there were parts of the hallway that were closed off and you could see Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman just sort of down the hall, which was always quite cool. Oh yeah, so I gave that 5 stars. Next, I read The Light Years by Elizabeth Jane Howard, and this was either a library book or on my Kindle. Oh, bless me. I gave this 4 stars. What did I have to say about it? I remember it being okay. So what did I write? I'm trying to make more of an effort to actually write reviews on Goodreads, so that, more for my own purpose, so that I can remember what it is that I enjoyed or didn't like about a book. Because, I mean, look at this, I only read this 2 months ago and I already can't fully remember. I remember enjoying it, and I really enjoyed the place setting and description. Let's just read the review. I enjoyed the writing immensely and felt as though I was there with them at the Sussex house. The reason for 4 stars was quite a lookbook. Oh, I think I put a typo in my review. That's embarrassing. For quite a big book, there isn't a huge amount of plot, but I imagine this is to tee up the next book in the series. So it's the first in a quartet. And yeah, exactly that. I do remember now. I didn't feel like, it was about 600 pages or something, and I feel like at the end of those 600 pages we didn't actually really get anywhere with a lot of the characters, but the prose was beautiful, the storytelling, yeah, really enjoyed it. You know, I live in Sussex, it is the summer, so it felt very, yeah, I was able to relate. Next, I read I Feel Bad About My Neck and Other Thoughts on Being a Woman by Nora Ephron, and this was a recommendation from Dolly Alderton and Pandora Sykes when they did their High-Low podcast, but also just this edition, I read it on my Kindle, and it was an edition that has been updated since, which includes a foreword by Dolly Alderton. So I was just, yeah, I wanted to read it because, like I say, she's my goddess. I don't think she could ever do anything wrong in my eyes. But yeah, I gave it 3 stars. I think what I thought was, let's read the review. I think there were points that were definitely interesting, and there were particularly some of the notes around aging and the expectations of women as they get older, but I just felt like I couldn't really connect with the book. Where's my review? Oh, I didn't write one. But yes, some of the stories just, and you know, also, I don't know if this is just me and my mind isn't broad enough to understand these things, but I always find I disconnect a little bit with things set in the States. I don't know why it's the States particularly, because I love reading about things, about settings in different cultures. One of my favourite ever books that I read was Stay With Me by, what's the author's name? Stay With Me by Eyre. Oh god, I'm going to completely butcher this. I apologise in advance. Stay With Me by Ayobami Adebayo. I'm so sorry. I'm so ignorant and white and British. But that was one of my favourite books I've ever read, set in Nigeria. So fascinating. As an ignorant British white woman, I clearly don't know anything about African culture, and it was such a wonderful eye-opener. I digress. Anyway, there's just something I really can't connect with American writing. I found because she's older, because it was written longer ago, perhaps, you know, there were definitely interesting themes and things that I enjoyed and picked up on and thought that were interesting. Definitely things that I thought were interesting and that I picked up on that I have since continued to think about, but as a general, meh, 3 stars, probably wouldn't read it again. Next was Swimming Lessons by Claire Fuller, and this is about a girl, she's sort of, well, it's nondescript, but we're going to assume early 20s, and her parents, her father who is a famous author, and her mother who went missing when she was a small child, I think about 5 or 6 or something, and everyone just assumes her mother is dead, but our protagonist has never believed that her mother is dead, and it's sort of, the story jumps between what was happening between her parents in those early days, how they got together, their relationship, and ultimately why she did go missing, and the modern day, because the girl is sort of been brought back to her family home with her elder sister because her father has had a fall, he's getting older, and I really enjoyed this. Why did I only give it 4 stars? I think because I am quite a harsh marker when it comes to books. I think for something to be a 5-star for me, it has to be phenomenal, stick in my mind, would 100% go back and read it again, like the Dolly Alderton. And this is a very good book, and I do recommend it to people. Would I read it again? Maybe, maybe not. It was a library book, so I don't actually have the physical one. So I think an indication for me would be, would I go out and purchase it with my own money? Perhaps if I saw it going cheaply in a charity shop or something, I would pick it up. It was definitely a good story, and the writing was really lovely. I loved the setting of the house in the old swimming pavilion and down at the beach and going for swims at sort of 5 o'clock in the morning. And it was really lovely, and the sort of backstory about how her parents got together was really interesting. So yeah, would recommend that one. Next was Jane Eyre by Charlotte Brontë. I mean, we don't really have to go into this too much. It's a classic. I actually listened to this on audiobook. I've gotten quite into reading the classics on audiobook. I mean, I've read Jane Eyre before in a physical book. Did you know where I'm from in Stoke, people say book rather than book? Book, Luke and Cook. Little tidbit of life as a Stokey for you there. I digress. Again, yes, I've read Jane Eyre previously as a book, but I'm quite enjoying listening to the classics on audiobook. I listened to Pride and Prejudice at the end of last year, and I just think it actually kind of makes it more digestible, particularly, you know, now that the world is opening back up and we can go on long drives. I've had to drive back up to Stoke a few times in the last couple of months, and I quite enjoy having an audiobook to listen to, because that's a 4-hour drive, so you can really get stuck into it, and listening to them whilst out running or just going for a long walk or something, or doing your cleaning or something. I just think it's really nice to have something to get a bit absorbed into. And yeah, the classics I do find they're a bit more accessible on audiobook, because I don't know, maybe I think that everyone has a different interpretation of, you know, the Brontes or Jane Austen every single time they read them. And I've not read all of them. I've not read all the Austens. I think I've read 4 out of the 6. And I haven't read any Anne Bronte. But yeah, I'm enjoying this format, so we'll see. But you know, maybe in a few years time I'll come back to them as physical books, and we'll find them a bit easier to digest. And I don't know, you know, it's a great book, it's a fantastic story, and I think what I got from it this time around was, so when I read it previously, I think I sort of gave it sort of 4 stars because I felt like I had to give it a good rating, because obviously it's such a famous story and you know, it's so renowned for being this amazing book, but I kind of didn't get it. I was like, it's just a love story between this girl and this old man, like what even is that? But now I've sort of picked up on how radical it must have been at the time of publication. What year was it published? Was it 1860? 1847. And yeah, the themes of independence and feminism that were coming through even in those early, you know, this was pre-suffragettes, and obviously, you know, there was still a movement of women trying to gain a little bit more independence that was going on at this period, but this was during Queen Victoria's early years of her reign, so there was a female leader, there was a queen. But yeah, just sort of looking at it with those eyes and sort of thinking about how it must have been perceived at its time is just, it's been really interesting. So really enjoyed that, and I gave it 5 stars because, again, I think there's a little bit of pressure to find it amazing, and it was really good. I really enjoyed the story this time around, and I was able to appreciate the prose and the writing more through listening to it through audiobooks. So that is a top tip for if you're struggling and you want to read the classics. Don't feel like you have to read the classics just because everyone does. You know, they are difficult and inaccessible, and certainly when you're first getting into reading, don't think that, oh, I must go and read Sense and Sensibility or something. No, it's a ridiculous place to start. Go and start with a trashy novel and pick things up from there. And finally, I just finished The Garden of Lost and Found. This is a library book, as you can see. So when restrictions eased on the 12th of April in the UK, or in England certainly, I hadn't realised that libraries reopened that day. Everyone was just so excited that the pub was reopening. I was excited the gym reopened that day, but everyone was just buzzing to go to the pub. And I was walking through town, it was either on the day or the day after the restrictions eased. I walked past the library and saw it was open and was like, oh my God, why has no one been talking about the fact that libraries reopen? So I picked up as many books as I was allowed, which I think was 8. And I've got this and one more to finish from that stack of 8. And yeah, I've just been working my way through them. But it was, yeah, I gave it 2 stars. What did I say in my review? I just finished this a couple of days ago, so there were elements I loved, particularly the descriptions of the months at the house, but I found the actual story unengaging and quite predictable in places. The twist wasn't surprising or particularly original, and I didn't like the jumps between past and present day. They didn't feel smooth, and it felt quite jarring to the telling of the story. So this is the story of a painting called The Garden of Lost and Found. It's not actually about a garden. And this painting is thought to have gone missing in 1918. It was the most famous painting of the day. You know, we're talking sort of like the Mona Lisa of its time. People were queuing for hours and hours just to go and see it. And in 1918, tragedy struck. The house where the artist was living, he burnt it to the ground, and the painting is thought to have been destroyed. And we then revisit this particular house. So it was actually sort of his summer house studio thing that he burnt down, which destroyed the painting. And we revisit the house in the modern day with his great-great-granddaughter, and she's going through a divorce, and she's moved her children out of London to this country house that she just so happens to have inherited, even though she's got absolutely no money, but she's now got this huge manor house in the Cotswolds. And yeah, so we're just jumping back and forth between the story of the modern day, of how she's trying to manage her life, moving her children out of London to the Cotswolds, and the story of how the painting came to be and how it came to be lost, and her great-grandparents' story. And like I say, there were a couple of twists at the end, neither of which were surprising. I think I've read too many. I really enjoy this kind of book, especially in the summer. I've read quite a lot of these. I would highly recommend Kate Morton as an author for these kinds of books about big English country houses with different generations of families and a secret or a mystery or something. So I've read quite a lot of these kind of books. I think I've read everything Kate Morton has written, actually. I love her work. So yeah, this didn't feel surprising, and there weren't a lot of great reviews on Goodreads either, but people on Goodreads were saying this was really disappointing based on Harriet Evans's usual work. So I want to give her other books a try. to be honest, this was 550 pages. And I don't know why I read all the way to the end of it. I think I was sort of getting towards the end when I realised that I wasn't really enjoying it. So by that point I thought, oh well, I've put in the slog by this point, so let's just keep going and we'll finish it. And yeah, you know, it is disappointing when you find a book that you don't enjoy, but I do find that tends to be the exception rather than the rule. But you know, I think perhaps that's just over the years I've really honed my skills on picking out texts and stuff that I enjoy. So that is my wrap up for Q2 of 21, or you know, Q1 of the 21-22 financial calendar, however you want to do it. And I read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 books in 3 months. Okay, that's all right. That's just over 2 books a month. That's okay. And you know, a few of them were quite chunky as well, actually. So with final assessment, that's fine. I'm on 17 out of 30 books for my reading challenge. If anyone wants to follow me on Goodreads, my username is just Evelyn Jones, I think. Yep. But I'll also leave the details down below in the description. And yep, looking forward to the next one as we go through the proper summer months and early autumn, what comes up on my shelf next. Let me know what your favourite books of the year so far have been, or over the last 3 months, and would love to get a bookish discussion going down in the comments. And like I say, feel free to follow me on Goodreads and I will follow back. And yeah, I hope you're all having a lovely day, and I will catch up with you next time.